Realignment talk continues to dominate the college sports landscape. Should Illinois fans be worried? Locked On Illini, let's go.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. A simple reminder, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can hit me up at IlliniCast if you'd like to support the show. Costs you nothing. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Speaking of the show, today's going to be a fun one. Obviously, for the better part, for the last few years now, the conversation has been revolving around realignment and which schools are going to be joining the Big Ten, which ones are going to be joining the SEC, the Big 12. Is the ACC going to survive? RIP Pac-12. So we're going to kind of discuss Illinois' role in what the future of the college sports landscape is going to look like. And finally, also, I'm going to be able to air the interview I had with Locked On Timberwolves when I kind of just we had a back and forth. I discussed Terrence Shannon Jr.'s career at Illinois, and then in the third segment we kind of talked about what his role with the Timberwolves is going to look like. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So who's in, who's out? The conversation for the past week, for the past few months, has been Florida State and their lawsuit against the ACC. And obviously Clemson followed suit shortly thereafter, and the rest of the ACC kind of seems to be in a waiting mode, trying to wait for the result of what happens with Florida State's lawsuit. But most people are expecting, and supposedly can happen very, very soon, that Florida State will be granted their release from the ACC. I think the plan is probably they'll reach some sort of settlement on the whole grant of rights deal, and Florida State will be free to join whatever conference they want, whether it's the Big Ten, which is the rumor I'm hearing, or the rumor that's been really popular over the past week is they've been in conversations with the Big 12. So I just want to kind of think about where the future of college football, and really this decision is going to be made about college football. So that's kind of where I'm going to focus this on. College football is where all the money is. I know Illinois is a basketball school, and we're super passionate about our basketball, and dare I say a little apathetic when it comes to the football side, but football is what's driving all these decisions. And while having said that, when you think about the historical performance of our football team, you would think that I wasn't very optimistic on Illinois and them kind of having a seat at the table, I guess you can say. I actually am pretty optimistic that we're going to be involved in some sort of way with the highest level of college football for a very, very long time. Right off the bat, I just want to say me and all other Illini fans should be super grateful that the University of Illinois was one of the founding members of the Big Ten Conference. And there's almost no scenario I can think of where the Big Ten would kick another university out. And even if they were in position to do that, I don't think they would kick out the state school where their headquarters are located at. I would feel like they'd want some sort of presence in Chicago, in the state of Illinois. But that's a minor reason. The main reason I'm optimistic about Illinois and our future is none other than AD Josh Whitman. I think there's very few people out there who know really what's going on more than Josh does. Josh now is pretty much involved with a lot of the decision makings that's moving forward. There was a report that came out a couple weeks ago, which showed the athletic revenue of, I think, like top 50 schools in the country. And Illinois finished, it was either 25 or 26, which I thought was incredible. I really genuinely did not think that our revenue was going to be that high compared to what the national perception of the University of Illinois is. Again, dominated by the fact that our football team, quite honestly, just hasn't been that great. But being top 25, revenue is what these conferences want. The whole point of, breaking up other conferences and bringing schools in is to be able to make that almighty dollar. And right now we have proof that Illinois is doing that. I don't have to mention our basketball program. You guys all know Illinois brings in ratings. That's why Illinois is involved with topics from national media every single week. Folks that are supposed to be covering 300 teams somehow mention Illinois every week. Why? Because we matter. We're passionate. We click. We bring eyeballs to TV. There's a reason why we get scheduled in a lot of these primetime, big showcase type of games. It's because television people know Illinois brings eyeballs on their basketball team. But this also shows you how important this upcoming football season is. And I think Josh knows that. I know we don't really like to think about it, and I've tried to have this conversation before without much success when it comes to the viewers. I think it is vital that in any which way we can, we try to support the football program. Bret Bielema has one of the toughest jobs in the world ahead of him. And I've been, I wouldn't say impressed, but I've been content with his recruiting so far. I certainly think he's raised the floor of the talent level of this team compared to previous years. We're not really at the point where we go into a week knowing that we're going to get blown out. We can compete on a talent level. Where Bret is still obviously struggling is getting the higher level talent in. But, and I hate to say, obviously, I talk Locked On Illini, I talk about Illini sports, but I'm not technically affiliated with them in any sort of way, right? I mean, I have a degree from them, and my show's called Locked On Illini, so I don't want this to sound like I'm advertising the university. No, not at all. But any way that folks can kind of support football and basketball, I think we really need to make a concerted effort to do so, whether it's buying season tickets or making those NIL donations, whatever it takes. Some of you may not agree with this take, and some of you may be okay with being a school like maybe Kansas, just having a star basketball program and a lukewarm football program. And now, some of you might say, hey, look, Kansas is higher than Illinois right now, which is true. I get it. But these new TV media deals haven't really kicked in yet. And we're going to be making a substantial more amount of money than the Kansas program is. And so I genuinely think that Illinois is going to continue to elevate themselves up, whereas Kansas, who's obviously stuck in the Big 12, which, don't get me wrong, is probably going to be the third strongest conference moving forward once whatever happens to the ACC finalizes itself. But it won't come close to touching the monetary value of the SEC or the Big Ten. And, you have schools out there like UConn. UConn, obviously, they've got a dynasty in the making. They've won the last two national basketball championships, and their football program is pretty much forgotten. And I know, and tell me if this is you in the comments, that most of you would actually kind of be okay with that. There's just not a lot of enthusiasm for the football program, but I'm not. When I think about college athletics, I love everything about it. I want us to have a good football program because it matters in the national scale of things. Football is by far the most important sport in this country. It passed baseball years ago. NFL owns that market, and college football is right behind. I'm proud of my university. I love my university, and I want them to continue to contend and compete in the highest level of the sport. I think, fortunately, right now, we're very lucky that we have Josh Whitman in place at the perfect time, because hopefully everything's going to be settled. The dust will be settled in about 10 years or so. And in that time, Josh Whitman, obviously, he hired Brad Underwood. He's hired Shauna Green. He hired Brett Bielema. He understands how important these athletic programs are. And the reason he hired Brett Bielema is because he believes that Brett can be a program builder, similar to, what he kind of did at Wisconsin. I think that's just the goal of what he wants to do for our football program. And with him being in charge and involved with some of the committees that are discussing the future of the sport, I think Josh will continue to be a prominent voice in keeping the University of Illinois involved. And I do know he's going to be working tirelessly to make sure that our basketball program, and more importantly, our football program, is doing everything it can to slowly take, even if it's just baby steps, but constantly moving in the direction of improving and just trying to keep pace with the sport around it. For some of you, this is important. For some of you, this may not be. Some of you might be okay with reallocating our assets directed more towards basketball and just kind of letting football wither away as one of the bottom feeder schools in the Big Ten like we've been for a while. But just keep in mind, in 10, 15 years, without any sort of hint of success, there is a chance that the Big Ten in itself might not exist anymore. And some of the top tier schools from the Big Ten and the SEC might decide to kind of join forces and start their own super conference. Where would that leave Illinois? Without a good football program? Not even good, just an average football program? I don't know. And honestly, I don't want to find out. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, now it's going to be time for part 2 of my crossover with Ben Beacon from Locked On Wolves. On yesterday's episode, you saw part 1, where we more so discussed Terrence's career at Illinois and what kind of player he was for our university. Today's episode has more to do with how Ben sees Terrence fitting in on Minnesota. Now, again, full disclosure, this was taped about a week ago. This was taped the day before Summer League started. So with Terrence's performances over the last few days, Ben's viewpoints might have shifted a little bit. He said some things which kind of surprised me. I'm curious what you guys think, but thank you, Ben, for your time, and hopefully I'll be able to have a chance to link up with Ben again at some point later on in the season. Please check him out at Locked On Wolves if you get a chance. And here's the second part of the interview.
All right, turning the keys over to Sunny. We're going to talk a little bit about Terrence Shannon Jr. as a pro. And of course, add anything else in along the way that maybe we didn't get to in the first segment, Sunny, but take it away.
Sure. But first and foremost, let's kind of give me a quick cliff notes on the last maybe 2 seasons of the Minnesota Timberwolves, just so Illini fans who are now becoming Minnesota Timberwolves fans. And those of you who are new Timberwolves fans, definitely follow Ben at Locked On Timberwolves. Give us a little cliff notes of what kind of team Terrence Shannon Jr. is suiting up for.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago, going in, the Wolves were coming off of, like, if you go back 2 years, they were coming off of a season where they were the 6th seed in the West. They lost to Memphis in the first round. They had made the playoffs for the first time in a long time, the second time in 19 years at the time, which is crazy. And there was a lot of optimism going into last season. But the year got off to a bit of a tough start. They made the Rudy Gobert trade. So there was, for anybody that follows the NBA or even doesn't, it was widely thought of as a massive overpay for a guy who's about to be 30, playing two bigs with Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. But still, Anthony Edwards is so exciting, and everybody thought, like, hey, what could this be? Well, Gobert was banged up after playing in Eurobasket in the summer of 22, and Karl-Anthony Towns hurt his calf at Thanksgiving and missed 60-plus games. The team still ended up winning 42 games, getting the 8th seed after the play-in tournament, but had to play the Denver Nuggets in the first round, lost to the eventual champion Nuggets in 5 games in 2023. Last season, a lot of people's expectations had come back down for the Wolves. It was effectively the same roster coming back and, traded a bunch of draft picks. They didn't have any incoming rookies that were going to play. And so there were a lot of people down on the Wolves going into last season. I was up on them in that I thought that they would be a playoff team. I didn't think they'd win 56 games. I thought they would win around 50, which was still more optimistic than most people. I thought they were probably the 4 or 5 seed in the West. They ended up getting the 3rd seed, and they were in the number 1 spot most of the season. Easily could have had the top seed in the West. Were relatively healthy other than Karl-Anthony Towns missing about a month in the spring with a knee issue. But Anthony Edwards took the leap. He became an all-star. Well, I guess it was a second all-star season. And was fantastic. Jaden McDaniels was great defensively. Rudy Gobert won Defensive Player of the Year. And it was really all about those players. Rudy getting comfortable, Cat staying healthy, and adopting a new role as a 4 and somebody who's guarding a little bit differently on defense, being asked to do some different things. But the offense struggled a little bit. It was middle of the pack for most of the season. Defensively, they were the best team in the league. It was actually only the second time in the last 20 years that there's been a gap that big between the best defense and the second best defense in the league in terms of defensive ratings. They were dominant defensively, but the offense was a little sluggish at times, lacked a little bit of pop, and, defense is kind of their identity. So as we're going to talk about, Terrence Shannon's kind of a perfect fit. This is a team that won 56 games. The top, 7 of the top 8 guys in the rotation will be exactly the same next year, barring something shocking in the next few weeks of the offseason. So this team should win mid-50s games. They should compete for the top seed and are a legit finals contender going into next season.
So was Terrence Shannon Jr.'s name kind of on your guys' draft board, in all the mock drafts and whatnot? Is that the type of player you guys were kind of looking for?
I think so. And I was, well, for a couple of reasons. Certainly I think it was actually ESPN. One of their last mocks did have him going to Minnesota. There were a couple of mocks that had him there. He was one of, I think, 10 or 12 players I previewed leading into the draft that the Wolves may be interested in. I think partly because he's an older college player and this is already a playoff team. They don't want to spend a ton of time developing somebody who potentially could be a rotation piece right away. And because he brings it transition. Like we talked about this last segment, the Wolves did not play fast enough at times last year. And they were a good shooting team. Like they had the 3rd best team 3-point percentage in the league, but they didn't take enough threes. So a guy who's going to be a volume 3-point shooter, play fast, and also have the body type and athleticism, and hopefully want to play really well defensively and kind of slot right into that mentality that they had on defense. It's kind of a perfect fit in that sense. Now, nobody had on their bingo card that the Wolves would trade up on draft night to pick 8 and take, Rob Dillingham from Kentucky. Right. And so I think we were all kind of thinking like, all right, who are they going to take at 27? They'll certainly be a rotation piece. Now, we can talk about exact role. I think he's going to be kind of on the edge of the rotation, but he fits in line with what they need, which is size on the wing. They love size on the wing. They needed more shooting, more volume shooting from outside the arc, and they needed to play faster and continue that defensive mentality. And I think Terrence Shannon Jr. should check all those boxes.
So do you foresee him being a rotational guy in his first year?
I think he'll be right on the edge. I think the Wolves have, 7 of the top 8 guys are back from last year. That's not going to change. Rob Dillingham would be certainly a rotation guy. They've basically already said he's our backup point guard. So that's 8. And then Joe Ingles, they just signed. And I mean, he didn't sign in Minnesota for the minimum to not play. And he's basically going to take that Kyle Anderson role, slow-mo, who was kind of that point forward off the bench. He's going to fill in that role. So that gets you to about 9 guys. And typically in an NBA season, your rotation that sees heavy minutes is closer to 9, but usually you're going to have 10 guys that play. So I really think it's Terrence Shannon Jr. and a couple of guys who have been around that are still younger players that will be kind of vying for those 10th man minutes, if you will. Some nights it might be 14 minutes if guys are in foul trouble. If somebody's banged up or misses or sits on a back-to-back, maybe he plays 20 minutes. Some nights, depending on the opponent and the matchup, he may get a DNP CD and not see the floor at all. I think it's him. It's Josh Minot, who's going to be a third-year guy out of Memphis, who's a different player. He's more of he's not as much a perimeter threat as he is a defender and a rebounder and just a little bit of a bigger body. I think those two are probably, and then Leonard Miller, who's a little bit more of a point forward type, really plays 4/5. So I think it also could change based on the matchup, but I think they'll give him every opportunity to earn a slot in the rotation. And he'll certainly at some point next year be part of the Wolves rotation, even if it's not opening night. He's going to be an important part of what this team's trying to do.
What was the initial response from T-Wolves fans when, at the conclusion of night 1 of the NBA draft, when they came home with Gillingham and Shannon?
I think overwhelmingly positive. I mean, the cost to move up to 8 to take Dillingham was not too prohibitive. It's a pick swap and a 2031 pick, and by that point, like, hopefully this team's been to the finals and it won a championship, right? Like, that's the goal. And so this team's also over the second apron, not to get too in the weeds on NBA cap nerd stuff, but like the short version is the Wolves can't sign anybody in free agency for more than the minimum. And so the only way you're going to make this team better over the next couple of years is through the draft. And they don't have very many picks because they traded them all for Rudy Gobert. So trading up with a future asset 7 years down the road to take a guy who's a consensus lottery pick and one of the best offensive players in the draft in Dillingham, and still getting a guy who was in the running for, player of the year in December, who averaged 20 plus points per game and fills some holes off your bench, coming out of that night with guys who even casual college basketball fans knew who both those guys were. And so coming out of the draft with those two players and that much more offensive punch and upside, because again, this is a team that went to the conference finals. I mean, they were 3 wins away from the finals last year, and the offense was middle of the pack at best. It was at times 18th, 19th in the league in terms of offensive rating. So to get 2 offensive players, and at least in the case of Shannon, somebody who's not going to hurt you defensively and may help you, is a big win.
So I guess, usually when in colleges their players are drafted, it tends to be on teams that are played poorly the season before. Illini fans are a little spoiled in this case, now being newly fans of the Minnesota Timberwolves. How close exactly would you say you guys are to winning that ultimate NBA championship?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it could have happened last year. I think it was a combination of having never been there, and I mean, nobody on the Timberwolves had played that deep in their career. I think Conley got to the conference finals once, and Gobert had never been there. And so, like, just from a fatigue standpoint, which sounds like a cop-out, but it's a very real thing when you're used to playing until May 1 and you're playing until June 1. I think that played into it. And obviously, Luka Doncic had a crazy series, and they ran into a buzzsaw and tough matchup for Minnesota. Luka Doncic really was. This team's going to be basically the same. And the only guys that, like, obviously Mike Conley being a year older isn't great. And Rudy Gobert being a year older, I mean, he's still in his early 30s, but Cat's in his prime. Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, those guys are only getting better. And so I think expectations next year are going to be in those mid-50s wins. It's going to be 55, 57, 59 wins, and certainly a top 4 seed in the West. And the West is tough. It didn't get any easier over the offseason, but this is absolutely a 50-plus win team. It's absolutely a home court team that has a shot at the finals. And if Anthony Edwards, he took the leap from like borderline all-star to like all NBA caliber player last year. And if he takes the leap to, I don't think there's any doubt he's got the ceiling of a top 3 player in the league. I don't think there's any question about that. If he can do that next year, this immediately is a finals contender. I think it is anyway, but it's a very serious one and is right up there with everybody else. I mean, other young teams in the West like Oklahoma City and Minnesota are going to be around for a while. Then you've got teams that are trying to retool and reload that are a little bit older. It's going to be a lot of fun. But I mean, you're right. Like, a guy who is as good as Terrence Shannon was in college doesn't often go to a team that's already ready to compete for a championship. And that's exactly the type of team he's going to.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Special thank you again to Ben for having me on the Locked On crossover show between Locked On Illini and Locked On Wolves. I hope you guys enjoyed both segments. Tell me where you think I was wrong. Tell me where you think maybe Ben was wrong. I think we kind of differ on the impact Terrence might have on Minnesota's team next year. I wish I was a little bit more vocal about that, but Terrence's play during Summer League up to a very promising start. Now, whether this continues once the actual season starts, who knows? But I do know for sure that we'll be tracking it, and Illini fans will definitely be paying attention. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Locked On Illini. Please, on your way out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I would sincerely appreciate it. It's a way for you to support the channel that it doesn't really cost you anything. If you do want to help out in other ways, there's a link to a subtext group where I communicate back and forth with a couple of you already on future shows and questions that you may want to ask a guest, in a future episode. There's a 14-day free trial, and I believe it's like $4.99. That's just a way for you to, support what I'm doing here and me to continue to provide the daily content that I'm doing for you. Because remember, right now, I'm the only daily source of Illini content, and I'm going to be now for about the next year or so. You're going to be getting shows 5 days a week right here on Locked On Illini. So definitely hit that notification button whenever you want to see a new video as soon as it comes out. Make sure you follow me at IlliniCast. I sometimes go live on that account. However you decide to support the program, just know I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you for tuning in today, yesterday, the day before. A lot of my viewers are returning viewers, and I just know I sincerely, humbly appreciate that. Having said that, we'll see you tomorrow. ILL, love you guys.